Hey, everybody. It's Stephen and Anthony. It's a Tuesday, and we often meet on Tuesdays to talk about things and to get our acts together. And so, one of the things we wanted to talk about today was this idea of there's no wrong answers in our deck.
Yeah, so the Make It Music deck is meant to inspire the teacher to put together Dalcro style activities through these different elements. We've got the starter deck, which it gives us easy prompts for starting a movement experience. Usually they're just pure movement prompts, something to start your class off. Then we have the Make It Music deck, which is a real interesting way to take those initial starter prompts and then make them into a slightly more musical experience and more expressive experience. And then we have the challenge deck, which is right here, which is meant to sort of expand or create or form a different practice using the prompt that you've set up with the first two decks. And then, of course, we also have the teaching artist deck, which is a really popular deck. And this deck is meant to help you deepen your practice and think more deeply about your teaching and yourself as an artist in your creative place in your classroom. And so each one of the decks, each one of the cards in the deck has got a prompt on it. And you know what? It is not meant to be, a sacred interpretation of a right or a wrong answer. Whatever that card makes you think of, whatever that card evokes in you as a teacher, is valid and is great. And we love it when people take the card and envision it in a different way. Often when we do workshops, we'll ask people, what would you do with this card, with this prompt, with this direction? And it's always amazing to hear how different people interpret it or take action on it in different ways.
The way I was taught, which I just have to believe is the way a lot of us here in the States we're taught to be teachers, is you're basically looking for the one right answer. Like, come on, just like write down the thing you're going to do, make it a good idea. Don't write down a bad idea, and now go do the good idea, as though there's just one way to execute any of our lesson plans. And that's how I was first introduced to the idea of lesson planning, and I'm sure that's how I started my practice. And it took me years to overcome a lot of those early assumptions about what's the right way to do it. What Dalcroze is really one of the sort of major lifts that Dalcroze has achieved in my teaching, and I know Anthony is on the same page, is that there's something built into the DNA of the Dalcroze mindset, which is that we're supposed to be iterating, we're supposed to be improvising, we're supposed to be reactive, we're supposed to be creative relative to the work that our students are offering us. So when something happens unexpectedly in the room, rather than seeing that as, oh, somebody has diverged from the lesson plan, we're supposed to recognize that as an opportunity. So improvisation is not just something that I, as the teacher, am musically doing. I sing improvisation, I clap improvisingly, I play the piano improvising, from as improvisation, but also the way that I'm unfolding the exercises in my class has an improvisatory element to it. And the closer I can tie myself to that, the sort of the more vibrant it becomes. So our fear, and we say it a bunch of times in the book because we're just worried about it. Our fear, anybody who came from a similar teaching background as we, prior to our Dalcroze work, our fear is that you would pick up a card and it would say, do this. And maybe it even has a sub instruction that says, like A or like B, and that somebody could think this is the one way this is supposed to go. And instead, we want to keep reinforcing there is no one way for any of these cards. In fact, what we really want to challenge, especially the more advanced teachers out there, we want to challenge you to hold yourself accountable to think of 20 things you could do with any of the cards. Like how many different things? And what you'll find is that as you get better at seeing all the potential ways, then you can more readily match a better answer with your current group of students. Maybe yesterday's students needed your third idea for this particular card, but now today's students, they actually need the 12th idea that you came up with, and that's going to be a better fit for them.
Yeah, if you draw the same card for every class, you might interpret differently just based on what's happening in your class. Oh, wait, now this doesn't feel like the right thing to do in this moment, or they're not ready for that extra step, depending on their age, depending on their experience level, depending on just the general vibe of the classroom. And so, again, the goal of the Make It Music is to foster a more responsive and flexible pedagogy in you. It's not to try to tell you the answers to your problems. It's to kind of equip you to be more flexible and responsive to your teachers to your students in the moment. And that is I think a real something that we learned from the Dalcroze practice for sure. So, a card like this is a starter card here. And this one here, I'll show you, it says long claps. You can read it. Clap a long note, stretching the gesture. I can't, it's backwards on my screen, so I can't read it.
All the way to the next clap.
All the way to the next clap. I had to read it backwards. It was a challenge. So now this is a pretty straightforward prompt. Now, if you've been in Dalcroze classes before, you probably would picture this pretty easily. Is when we clap, the long note stretches all the way to the next clap. You could give a lot of different instructions with what to do with that gesture and how to make it stretch to the next clap. I've done a lot of different ways of doing that. But if you were somebody who was not familiar with Dalcroze practice, I wonder what you would think of that card. I wonder what you would do with it, and I would love to hear what your first initial interpretation of a long clap would be.
And whatever it is, we are here to tell you that was probably a really good idea, or certainly a valid idea. Like if you solved even just the first two words, long claps, and didn't even read any of the next words below it, that's enough. And whatever it brought about in you is certainly valid. And then the question is, does it match or fit your current students well? And if we think, well, my first idea, I mean, I could probably get them to do it, but I know it'd be too silly and I'd lose control. Or I'd do it, but they'd get bored so fast. I couldn't keep doing it for more than about 5 seconds. Whatever the matching with your students are, then you maybe sometimes go to a second idea or a third idea or a fourth idea. But if you can get your students to do anything, whatever that initial interaction, and that's the whole point of the starter card, is it's not a whole exercise. It's just the beginning. It's an inroad. So if you can get them to do anything, that's why then we have the second deck, is so that you would then think, how do I extend it? So just thinking about that long claps, I picture long claps the way I just quickly thought it in my head is a very kind of left to right long clap. And so I start on one side of my body and I'm going to move both of my hands sort of in parallel over. What Anthony demonstrated was to me more of this one, which is also perfectly valid and much more classic kind of Dalcroze clap where my hands are maybe closer to the middle of me and as they pull apart. But what we're trying to notice is the space between. So when Anthony and I were coming up with that card, the part that is most obvious to us or maybe most valued would be that we're not giving up the space between our hands hitting. It's not just hit and now wait long. Not yet, not yet, not yet. And then hit and now wait long, but it's demonstrate long. So we're trying to find gesture and then all the ways. When I show my students that clap, we say, well, we can do little rainbow circles here together, but I also can be this way and that way. I can do one of these and I can high five with my friend. And so noticing like how big of a range all of that is, those would all be in the pile of 20 answers for what's a long clap.
Yeah, absolutely. And the starter cards we do also give you in the book, in the appendix, each card gets another paragraph. So if you're looking at the card and you're still like, I'm not sure what to do with this, with the starter cards only, we do give you a little bit more of a picture of what you might do, because we do understand that people may or may not have been in a Dalcroze class. They may or may not, have a real strong picture of what that might look like. Now, if you don't want to look in the appendix, you don't want to read our thoughts on it, great, awesome, don't. But if you look at the card and you're like, I'm just not sure what this is, we do give you a little extra help in the back of the appendix. We're not leaving you out to dry.
So the assumption with all those starter cards is that they're just the intro, which means they could exhaust themselves truly, literally in 5 seconds. Like you might get 5 seconds into this exercise and be like, this is not enough. I need to do more than whatever this is. Some of them will maybe maintain themselves for 20 seconds and maybe some of them a little bit more, but they're all limited. They're not complete in any way, which is why we then go to the second deck. The other thing about the starter cards is they're not all obviously music exercises if you do the thing. So just clapping, maybe you've already are noticing what is musical about that, or maybe your students are not. And so the second deck is to kind of help make the musicality of it more vibrant and then give us a variation on the first thing.
Right. So on the Make It Music cards, there's a bold prompt. I just pulled a random one here. Try standing in place or in a different place in the room. And then underneath that, we give you some suggestions. Now, on the Make It Music cards, the idea is that they build on the starter cards. So we give you those suggestions to kind of help make that connection for you if you're having trouble figuring out, wow, what does it mean to do a long clap standing in place or another place in the room, right? And so this one makes sense. Make it music by traveling to the next spot intentionally. Okay, so you're in one spot, you're going to clap and you're going to stretch that clap, and now we're going to travel to the next spot. That would be an obvious interpretation of that card for me, but every people will come up with different suggestions, and the different um, suggestions on the card might evoke something different in a different way to make it musical, right? So you should look at those sub suggestions that we have on there and use them if they make sense. If you're having trouble jog your memory, or if you see the first bolded heading and it gives you an idea, just go with that. Just go with that. That's just fine. If you're looking at the bold heading and nothing's coming to you, look at the subheading, see if something else helps you there. But again, it's all about what it means to you and in your moment with your kids. It does not, or your students, whatever age they are. It doesn't necessarily matter if it's right. That's not a thing.
It's not a thing. And there is no standard that we are picturing and we think, oh, if they don't figure this out, they stink, or they'll never get it, or they're somehow not in the game. The Dalcroze exercises, while we talk about it in the strategy cards, there are a couple, there are traditions that a lot of the longtime teachers maintain. None of them actually are the definition. They like none of that, not even the most famous parts are the definition of the Dalcroze practice. Under the heading of definition of the practice, or the spirit of the practice, or the philosophy of the practice, it's just that the body is engaged and that whatever you're doing feels. We're just trying to get it into the body. We're trying to be present in our music. And Jacques Dalcroze just figured out and made it pretty explicit that you realize if you just get the body doing the thing, it's hard to clue out. It's hard to daydream and clap the beat with the room at the same time. And so it sort of forces you to be in the music. And so the moving body is really the main trick. And then here's a whole bunch of ideas as how to go about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I think that now you've got a little activity going. Just what we've sort of suggested so far is with these claps. Now you want to take that little interaction, that little activity that's happening where we're clapping and we're traveling through space to another spot. There's a musical cue, and you want to expand that. You want to make it. Into an opportunity to create or to invent something. And so you pull a challenge card. Now, these ones generally have very much fewer words on the card, and they are much more open to interpretation. They might have a command on it, or they might give you something a little bit more sort of ethereal. Let's do one of these. This one's really, I like this. This is one of my favorite ones. More artist, less engineer. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. So maybe there's an aspect of what you were doing with those claps that was about precision or about counting but maybe we need to make that a little bit less mechanical, and we need to really make it more expressive. And that would be a reminder to take that activity and lean into that artistic, creative expressivity that you can evoke through the movement. Or maybe it would mean something different to you, and that would be awesome for us to hear about.
The challenge cards, again, my assumption is that when you pull a starter card, it's only going to last a little bit. It's got a shelf life live in the room that's pretty short. And unless you can iterate on it, unless you can find variation in that, activity, the activity is going to go stale and you're going to lose control, or everybody's just going to be bored. You're going to be bored, and this is a stupid exercise. And so you're looking for ways to find variations on that initial theme. And so the first set of variations are the Make It Music interventions. You could just draw a second yellow card, a second Make It Music variation, or a third and more if you wanted to go that way, or if that has sort of settled into something. So in those first two cards, we said clap the long claps, and now think about space in the room. So maybe I'm clapping a long clap and I walk steps underneath it until my next clap and I'm at a new space in the room. And now I walk, and then I'm walking a couple steps until I get to the next big clap and I'm at a new space in the room. Maybe we tie that together with some long tones from the piano or from a gong or from a set of chimes or whatever you have. Now we think, okay, we're off to a good start here. This is kind of an interesting exercise that I've never done before. What do I do now? And so you, of course, especially you more tenured teachers, you don't need our cards at all necessarily. You, of course, can just right now say, oh, well, if I had to come up with some variations on that, I would do this, I would do that, I would do the other. I would do it in pairs. I would do it laying on the floor. I would do it with chalk on a chalkboard. I would do it with ribbons. I would do it where sometimes it's long notes and then other times it's short notes. I would do it, I would do it with to a composed piece of music. I would do it to an improvised piece of music. You want to be able to keep thinking of those variations. But the nice thing about buying a little teaching tool is that it also gives you a bunch of ideas that maybe some of them you wouldn't have thought of. So you look at the challenge cards and think, oh, why wouldn't I have thought of that? Or, man, that is so off of where my mind normally goes. And the goal is not for you to memorize those cards. The goal is for you to get into a routine of seeing the way those cards opened up your thinking. That's the goal. We don't want you to. I had friends that I grew up with who memorized all the Trivial Pursuit cards.
Yeah,
And
why
so if
would
you
you
played
do
Trivial
that?
Pursuit with them, it was kind of fun, but it was also no fun in any way because they had just memorized all the cards. And so and it's not the game here. The game is not to memorize the cards and think these are the 50 things. That is not what we're hoping for. There is no one right answer. Instead, what we want you into is a mindset that says, oh, yeah, use that part of my brain, or use that part of the interaction in the room, or use this kind of imagery that might open up new ideas that I wasn't going to step into until I had gotten into this routine.
Yeah, sure. And then, finally, the teaching artist cards. Now, these ones have the least amount of words on them. They're really open to interpretation. This is beautiful right here. Look, I just opened up a random one.
Be
These are-
aware of the interstitial, the spaces between.
yeah, look at that. That's a nice thing to think about. And boy, what the heck does that mean? I don't even know. Now, the teaching artist cards don't really belong, in the same exercise as the other three decks. Although you know what, it might be interesting if people are finding that as a useful addition, a useful sort of meta, thought process to add into their activity. You could think about this as a additive to the activity. That would be an interesting way to do it. But really, we love these as a way for teachers to reflect and teachers to think about their daily practice. And so, and these ones have way less words on them. They're way more open to your interpretation and really, could mean a lot of different things.
And we want to encourage, though, the same mindset. There isn't just one sacred answer to be aware of the interstitial. And so, whatever the first thing, when you say aware of the space between, well, then the next thing is between what in that particular card. And you realize there's lots of in betweens. There's lots of spaces that maybe I take for granted. So, it could be the space between my students' claps, which would be the kind of first Dalcrozian thing, like, oh yeah, we talk about this all the time. It's not just the hit, but it's the space between the hits, and that's why we're using gesture. Of course, yes, don't forget to be aware of the interstitial, but it could also be the space between my groups of students. Be aware of that hallway time and value the way kids are getting to and from your class. Oh, right. If I could just focus on those transitions a little bit more, how smoother could maybe my day be? Or be aware of the space between a marking period and a second marking period, or be aware of the space between the time I clock in and I clock out, or the space between the time I clocked out and now I'm going to clock back in again. What am I doing with my downtime in between my days of teaching? And any of those and so many more are all acceptable. They're all good. They're all valued. There isn't just one answer. So we want to just continue that. We wanted to make the little little video today just to try again, because I know my own inclination is to just find the right answer and then stop thinking. Like just somebody freaking tell me the answer so that I could stop having to work and I could just know the answer. But so much of the vibrancy of our teaching practices will come from the fact that you are an alive teaching artist. And so, which means there isn't just one way. We are trying to iterate. We're trying to be creative. We're trying to be present. We're trying to work in ensemble with each other, which means me with my students, me with my administration, me with my peer teachers. I'm trying to have that kind of awareness as I'm involved in the day. And if I can just keep a hold of some of that vibrancy, it's so much easier to have the energy to get through my day, as opposed to I'm just stamping another widget. I'm going to teach the same dumb song I always teach, and it never feels
Yeah.
rewarding in an inner
Yeah.
way.
Absolutely. Well, I hope everybody goes to makeitmusic.com and orders it. Please reach out to us. Let us know if you're using the cards, how you're using them, what your interpretations of some of these cards are. Leave a comment here on YouTube. Make sure you're following us at MIM Dalcroze on Instagram and on Facebook. And stay in touch. Let us know. We want to hear from you what you're finding useful about our new resource.
I can't wait to meet you all in person. Thank you so much, everyone.